I agree that in November 1941, when the Battle of Moscow reached its peak and ferocity, Stalin demonstrated exceptional courage and strategic foresight. His decision to remain in the besieged capital, rather than leave it, as many expected, became a symbolic act of great significance. The appearance of the leader on the tribune of the mausoleum on November 7th, during the parade, had an effect comparable to a powerful explosion. The whole country, as well as the world community, witnessed that the head of state had not abandoned his people in a difficult moment, and that Moscow, as the heart of the country, would not be given to the enemy. This was not just a gesture, but a powerful message of unwavering determination to fight. This historically important parade will long remain the subject of thorough study by historians and discussions among subsequent generations. Unfortunately, at the time of the release of this video material, none of the participants in this memorable event are still alive. The last of them, Vasily Mihailovich Lagodin, a veteran whose eyes saw those terrible but heroic days, passed away on September 2nd, 2023, reaching the venerable age of 103 years. His passing marked the end of an entire era, and a reminder of the courage of the generation that defended the country. By November 1941, the situation in the capital had reached a critical point when the threat of the city's capture became very real. A state of siege was declared, which indicated an immediate and imminent danger to Moscow. Industrial enterprises, which were critical for the country's defense capability, and a significant part of the civilian population were urgently evacuated to the eastern regions. The residents of Moscow who remained in the city actively participated in the construction of barricades right on the streets, creating obstacles to a possible advance by the enemy. Sapper units were engaged in mining key objects of the urban infrastructure, including bridges, factories, and administrative buildings, preparing for defense in the event of an enemy breakthrough. The air defense forces, working under extreme stress, repelled the incessant attacks of enemy aircraft daily and nightly, trying to undermine the morale of the defenders. At an accelerated pace, units of the People's Militia were formed, into which volunteers from all strata of the population, who did not want to give up their city, enlisted. The assault on Moscow was expected in the coming days, and the tension in the city reached its peak. Already by November, advanced units of the German Army Group Center were sighted just a few dozen kilometers from the city limits, which further increased anxiety and the feeling of uncertainty. By that time, the German army, which was proud of its rapid and successful military operations, had not yet experienced the bitterness of serious defeats. It was used to the rapid advance into the enemy's territory, sweeping everything in its path and not encountering worthy resistance. However, near Moscow, this well-oiled war machine faltered for the first time, and the German troops faced fierce resistance and tenacious battles, which significantly slowed down their advance, despite the fact that the Barbarossa Plan, developed with German meticulousness, deviated significantly from its original time frame. The German forces were still in the immediate vicinity of the capital, which made a decisive battle inevitable and extremely fierce. This is why, given the historical significance and drama of the moment, I am asking you to support my channel with a subscription and be active by liking, so that you can learn even more exciting and informative facts about World War II and the points of view of all its participants on various events that had a colossal impact on the course of history. In order to raise the morale of the Red Army soldiers and strengthen the faith of the civilian population in the inevitability of victory, the country's leadership developed a brilliant and bold plan that stood out for its unconventionality. The 24th anniversary of the October Revolution was approaching, and it was decided not to cancel the festive events, but on the contrary, to hold a military parade on Red Square in full, as was customary in the pre-war years. This decision was a demonstration of the strength and steadfastness of the Soviet regime. When Adolf Hitler, known for his uncontrollable anger, learned about this event, He was extremely indignant and angry, considering it a personal insult, but we will talk about this in more detail a little later. The preparation for this historical parade was carried out in the shortest possible time and in an atmosphere of the strictest secrecy, reminiscent of a spy film. The participants of the parade themselves, soldiers and officers, were often unaware of the true purpose of the training exercises, believing that this was a normal preparation for military operations. Moreover, even the high-ranking military leaders and members of the Politburo, who were supposed to be aware of all strategically important decisions, were informed about the upcoming event only on November 6th. That is literally the day before it took place. Such strict secrecy was absolutely necessary in order to exclude the slightest information leak and prevent possible acts of sabotage by the enemy aimed at disrupting this important event. As a result, about 28,500 people, representing the elite of the Soviet army, marched onto Red Square, the historical center of the capital. These were Red Army soldiers from various units stationed in Moscow and its surroundings, demonstrating their power and readiness to defend the city. Among them were two NKVD divisions that had received special training and were responsible for maintaining order, as well as two rifle divisions formed mainly from brave volunteers of the People's Militia. This is clearly visible in the footage of the historical chronicle, where the militiamen were often wearing whatever they could find, thus showing their readiness to fight for their homeland. No matter what, almost all able-bodied men and women of Moscow, who did not want to give their city to the enemy, were placed under arms. The infantry units were followed by a regiment of air defense, which played a key role in defending the capital sky from the raids of enemy aircraft. Cadets of the Moscow Artillery School, who demonstrated a high level of training, two tank brigades, which represented a powerful armored force, and an artillery regiment of the NKVD, equipped with modern combat equipment, 140 artillery guns, 160 tanks, and the legendary machine gun Tachankas, which became one of the symbols of the Civil War, drove across Red Square. The parade was completed by several thousand armed workers who were ready to defend their city and factories. The culmination of the parade was the heartfelt, emotional, and inspiring speech of Joseph Stalin, in which he spoke with pride and patriotism about the heroic past of our country, about the courage and steadfastness of the Soviet people, calling on everyone to fight for freedom and independence, for a future without war. As I noted earlier, everything that happened on Red Square on November 7th, 1941 had a bombshell effect in informational and psychological terms, and had a huge impact on the morale of both the Red Army soldiers and the entire civilian population. Soviet society received a powerful emotional and patriotic impulse, similar to a charge of electrical energy. A long-awaited hope returned that victory in this brutal war was possible, which many had already ceased to believe in, seized by despair and fear. The people became unwavering in their confidence that Moscow would not be surrendered to the enemy, that it would withstand this difficult struggle, that justice and truth were on the side of the Soviet Union. The whole world saw that the Soviet Union had not given up, was not broken, and was ready to fight to the very end, demonstrating its unshakable fortitude and willingness to defend its homeland. This, of course, was also seen by Adolf Hitler, who was enraged by such a brazen step-by. The Soviet leadership, we all know very well that it was quite easy to upset the Führer, but such a large-scale and well-organized event, held right under the nose of the Wehrmacht, which apparently was already making plans to celebrate Christmas in the Kremlin, finally threw him off balance. Adolf Hitler, in his megalomania, sincerely could not understand how Stalin dared to take such a brazen and defiant step, daring to tease him in this way. According to some testimonies of historians and eyewitnesses of those events, the Führer furiously ordered bombers to be sent to Red Square in order to disrupt the parade and take revenge for such humiliation, which was inflicted on him and his army personally. But the forces of the Soviet air defense, showing exceptional professionalism and the highest level of training, flawlessly coped with their task, and not a single enemy bomb fell on Red Square, causing no harm to the participants of the parade and not disrupting its conduct. It is also said that the snowfall that fell on the Capitol on this very day also contributed to the protection of the city from enemy aircraft, reducing the effectiveness of the German aircraft to zero, preventing them from carrying out their insidious plans. By the way, there is a widespread misconception associated with the parade on November 7th, 1941, which I confess honestly, I myself shared until I began to carefully prepare this video material. Since childhood, we have all heard, read, and thought that the units of the Red Army that participated in the parade went directly from Red Square in festive uniform to the front line, to the very thick of battles. But as it turned out, this does not quite correspond to reality and is a myth that has formed over time. A significant part of the Red Army soldiers returned to their barracks and places of deployment after the end of the parade, not taking direct part in the battles immediately after this event. Only 2 regiments of the 2nd Rifle Division, formed from the People's Militia, which demonstrated their determination and readiness to defend their country, went to the front line to carry out combat missions. They took up defensive positions on the rear line of defense in the area of Odintsovo and Sparrow Hills, preparing for a possible enemy breakthrough. Thus, after the end of the parade, no one of the participants in the parade went directly to the front line, to the hot spots, but of course, all the participants in this historical event who marched across Red Square that day eventually took direct part in the Battle of Moscow, and how many of them survived these severe trials remains only in the memory of history, in the archives, and in the hearts of their descendants. As for Adolf Hitler, this was in fact his first serious and significant defeat, namely the powerful ideological blow that he received from the Soviet leadership, crossing out all his calculations and plans for a quick victory in this war. After the overwhelming triumph near Moscow, a deceptive euphoria will set in, which unfortunately will lead to a series of tragic and painful defeats near Kharkiv, Leningrad, and in Crimea. The enemy, despite all the defeats, will still reach the Volga, which will be a huge test for the Soviet people. But the Soviet people, having demonstrated their steadfastness, courage, and unwavering will, despite all the hardships and trials, will still bring the long-awaited victory in this terrible end. Bloody War, goodbye. I was glad to see you on my channel, and I hope you learned something new for yourself. Please don't forget to write your comments, share your opinion, like, and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss new, interesting, and informative videos dedicated to the history of our country.